going to private school in Santa Monica, living in Santa Monica, like, and a pretty great life. And then you're basically behind bars in Chinatown with some really, dodgy people, also struggling with mental illness. And I just turned 18.
Dear Family is a podcast hosted by Rachel Steinman, a writer, an educator, and a mental health advocate. And Rachel gets us up close and personal, so we feel a strong connection, familiarity, and comfort with her guests. So settle in and join us as we search for true healing and journey with Rachel and her most interesting guests.
Hi, dear family and friends. Get ready for another inspirational and eye-opening story. Thank you so much for listening. And if you aren't already doing so, please subscribe and share, dear family. It means the world to me and makes all the difference. Today we're doing something different, but perfectly aligned with Dear Family's mission. We're having a father and son as Dear Family guests. Tim Davis was just 11 when he lost his mother. Never properly dealing with the trauma, he ended up struggling with substance abuse throughout high school, and he got into a lot of trouble. But high school wasn't all bad because Tim fell in love and married his high school sweetheart. He had 2 children before getting divorced. Tim's sober now and has an amicable relationship with his ex-wife, which allowed him to successfully co-parent his son Ryder and his daughter Tess. When Ryder turned 18, he had a manic episode that put him in the hospital for 3 days. Ryder was diagnosed with bipolar, and that was when everything changed. Grateful to be introduced to the amazing resources of National Alliance on Mental Illness, Tim soon joined the NAMI Westside Los Angeles team, becoming an education coordinator. The role offered him the opportunity to be of service to an expanding community impacted by mental illness by connecting them to classes and support groups. Tim's diverse background as a TV writer and a communications director for a tech startup made him well-suited to help spread the word about NAMI and all its programs so families don't have to wait until they're in crisis. Ryder took a gap year before starting college to work on treatment and his mental health. Ryder is now a 20-year-old freshman at Boston University, and like his dad, he's now advocating for mental health awareness by presenting to students through NAMI's renowned Ending the Silence program. It's quite a treat to sit in on a middle school, high school, or family presentation where Tim is the lead presenter and his beloved son is the youth presenter. They share their personal stories about mental health and warning signs and resources to get help. Tim is filled with pride and gratitude as he watches his son handle his challenges and communicates about them with grace, humor, and courage, knowing he will inspire a younger generation to ask for help if they need it. Together, this father and son duo's tireless advocacy is driven by their mission to end the shame and stigma that continues to surround mental health conditions by speaking out so others know that it can and it will get better. Tim and Ryder are here to remind us how the love and support from our family and our loved ones can make all the difference in the world. I just wanted to let all you know that we are recording today at the NAMI Westside Los Angeles office in Westwood. And Ryder and Tim just did jumping jacks and push-ups to get the blood flowing. So we are ready to go. And this is the same place that I first met Tim when I came to discuss possibly being a lead presenter for the Ending the Silence program for NAMI. And I just want to thank you so much for giving me that shot, because it's one of my favorite things to do is to speak with kids and families. So thank you for that.
You're welcome, Rachel. And it really has been such a pleasure to have you on the team.
Thank you. And I'm so excited to have Ryder here. What a great thing to have a father and son on Dear Family. So, okay, because this is called Dear Family, I'm going to start with you, Tim. Can you tell us just a little bit about your childhood and about your family? Because we mentioned how your mom passed away when you were very young.
Yes, you did mention that. And that was a fantastic introduction, by the way. I almost feel you don't need the interview.
Oh, no, we want details.
we're full of details. I do come from a family of writers on both sides. And actually, someone just texted me, Harvey Weinstein, when he appeared in court, brought in a biography written about my grandfather and my great uncle on my mom's side, Herman Mankiewicz and Joseph Mankiewicz. My grandfather was a writer. Have I ever told you this?
No.
You ever heard of Citizen Kane?
Yeah, my grandfather wrote Citizen Kane.
Wow.
And his brother, Joe Mankiewicz, was a notable writer-director.
All About Eve.
All About Eve, Letter to Three Wives. He also directed one of the biggest debacles of its time, Cleopatra.
Wow. I love it. Hollywood royalty.
So it was a Hollywood family. My mother and father both grew up out here in Los Angeles. On my dad's side, my grandparents on my father's side were also writers. So we have no shortage of stories to tell from our family. Sometimes Ryder, actually both my kids get a little tired of the stories. But I think it's a nice way of, staying connected to the previous generations. And my mom was a writer too. And she had just written and published her first novel. It's called Life Signs. And it come out. And I think it had just come out in paperback. And we had moved back. I grew up in New York City. We moved out here for 1 year. We lived in Malibu for a year when my dad was editing a documentary that he was working on. And we had just moved back to New York and we're looking around for an apartment. And the last day of my mom's life, I spent with her looking at apartments for us to move into. We'd actually gotten evicted from our apartment in the village because we had sublet it. I guess was against some regulations. I had a really nice day with my mom and looked at apartments and she took me bowling and I was a reasonably well-behaved kid for that day, which I think was unusual for me. I don't think I always was. So she treated me to some bowling at the end of the day. And then we went back to the place that we still had for a few more weeks. And I remember she got interviewed, I think by the New York Post for the paperback publication of her novel. And then we took a walk to go visit some friends of ours who lived in the village. And we did not even make it off of our block before two taxis hit each other, racing down these small village streets. And they both went through stop signs. They hit each other. And then one of them spun around and hit my mom.
And you witnessed this?
I did.
Oh.
And I do talk about this when I give presentations. I don't mention it in every presentation, but I do like people to know that, I understand what it's like to experience trauma. Because I'm able to talk about it now, I can talk about that there are healthy ways of processing trauma and talking about trauma. This happened 45 years ago. And actually yesterday, I was talking about it to a group of Malibu school students who suffered a trauma as a community with all the fires recently. So trauma seemed like it was a good subject to cover with them. And I noticed my body got kind of hot as I was talking about it. And I took off my, the sweatshirt I was wearing at the time. And then I got to talk to them about that, about feeling the feelings in my body as I was discussing trauma. So to me, that's all healthy. And it does make me, sitting across from my son, who I would have loved to have gotten to know his grandmother. And what passes for my spirituality allows me to believe that they are connected. And that she definitely knows him and loves him, but not the way I would have wished for.
That is just such a traumatic thing for an 11-year-old boy to see. Her book, was it nonfiction or fiction?
It was fiction, definitely autobiographical. It was about
wow.
a young woman having some struggles raising two kids in New York with a very earnest husband who, accurately, I think, reflected my dad's personality.
Wow. Did the book come out?
Yeah, it was called Life Signs.
What was her last name?
Yeah, the main character's full name was Camilla Ryder.
Okay.
Which is how.
So if I was a girl,
you would have been Camilla. Okay,
yeah.
All right.
And in fact, we were sure he was going to be a girl. We were locked in on Camilla. And then
why was Tess not named Camilla?
Because I think we felt
you maybe moved on.
Well, just we'd covered
that base.
Got it.
Now, Tess is partially named after my dad's mother, who was a writer named Tess Schlesinger.
Great names.
Yeah.
All right. So, Ryder, what about you? Tell us about your childhood and growing up in Santa Monica.
Very lucky to have grown up there. Yeah, I think, especially out here, everybody's parents are divorced, and that's really not even a generalization. It does kind of feel like everybody's parents are divorced.
Mine are.
But your kids aren't.
No.
Yeah. It's a funny thing having your parents divorced at 8, because now, over half my life ago, I don't really remember what came before. I do, but I don't really. And I think any younger, you obviously don't remember it at all. But any older, you might get really, really attached to the idea of the family unit. And so it kind of just came at the right time. And I'm very grateful to both my parents for maintaining, an amicable relationship, a decent relationship.
So glad we got divorced at exactly the right age for you.
Yeah.
Just how we planned it.
I hope so. But yeah, it is sort of like, a unified front on a lot of things, not on everything, but especially like when I, my life really turned upside down and I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. For them to really come together to help me in any way they could was so crucial. Without it, I would be very much adrift. So they really helped me find like structure, but also just find purpose together. So I'm very grateful about that.
You must feel very proud hearing that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I do. And I'm glad to hear him say that.
Yeah.
And I think he believes it, actually.
Yeah,
And
no, of course.
I don't think any divorce is easy. And our divorce was hard. And I feel very guilty for putting both Ryder and his younger sister through some tough years as we sort of struggled to disengage and yet stay connected to co-parent. I think we did a reasonably good job, but I will say that after Ryder's diagnosis, Gigi and I came together, and I think we grew closer than almost, any time, certainly since the later stages of our marriage. And like Ryder said, it was easy to form a unified front because we had such a clear common interest.
Well, that's wonderful because it doesn't always work out that way. So
Definitely.
I'm happy for you, Ryder, because I also have that. I have parents that rocky road at the beginning and are now great friends. And it's great because you're always going to be in his life and you can be amicable. That's the best way to go. Tim, I have been lucky enough to watch you present in a classroom of high school kids. And I really appreciate how you speak openly about how you started getting in trouble in high school, mostly because of substance abuse. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. First of all, I'm very well connected to my inner teenager. And I think my kids would say that I have an immature dad. I really relate to those kids that we're talking to. And when I walk into a classroom, it is not hard. It's 40 years ago, but it's really easy to remember how I felt back then. So I do feel like a lot of my teenage years were pretty unconscious. I also think I had, aside from perhaps having a case of PTSD, right? I also think I may have had some degree of ADD or ADHD, which weren't diagnosing as frequently back then as they are now. I got the nickname Orbit pretty early in my childhood before I was smoking pot and sort of purposefully putting myself in orbit. So I just really remember being unconscious, but, as I got into more and more trouble, starting to make that part of my identity. And I remember being called into the dean's office. I went to a boarding school. I actually met Gigi at boarding school and was in love with her from the moment I saw her. At the smoking area we had for teenagers back then. She was with her very much cooler boyfriend, Steve Baker. And I knew I never would have a chance with a girl as cool and beautiful as her. So I kind of fell in with a crowd of smokers and stoners, and that became my identity. I now see was my coping mechanism, and I love music and I did love writing, despite the fact that I didn't want to I didn't want to try to follow in the footsteps of all these notable writers in my family, but I did enjoy being creative. But I don't think I pursued or developed those passions or interests or maybe latent talents as much as I could have because I was knocking myself unconscious so much. And, I don't mean to say that I think every teenager should be sober. And I think that's also a really unrealistic expectation to place on them. But I definitely wish I'd had the perspective to know how I was using it and why I was turning to it. And, maybe I had adults in my life trying to lead me in that direction. And my dad did send me to therapists and, he knew I was in trouble. And I actually think my little brother, who was just a couple years younger than me, he suffered because of how much attention and energy I took from my dad. And, I think my brother was sort of like straight A student, went to Harvard, just on a smoother path, or so my father thought. But now my brother feels like, hey, what about me? That experience of knowing that my brother went undetected, for so long, has helped me be a better father to Tess, Ryder's sister. More or less, I've forgotten the original question, but I think it had something to do with
the question was just about substance abuse. Yeah. I mean, you were basically kind of numbing yourself, but you were going to therapy to deal with your mom.
Yes. I was going to therapy, but, I remember my early therapist had, he would give me Chips Ahoy chocolate chip cookies. And so I used to show up stoned and had the munchies. And so, I would just be chowing down on Chips Ahoy and saying, yeah, I'm really bummed about my mom.
Goodness.
But I don't think I was really doing the deep work there.
Right.
In college. And again, I developed a personality of a guy who was like a partier and liked music. And, but again, I also think wasn't even so much my personality. I was desperate to be cool and liked, like a lot of teenagers. But I just feel like I didn't take myself seriously. And that does bum me out. Like, I wish I had the wherewithal to think like, hey, it's worth developing this passion for music.
Where did you go to boarding school?
In Connecticut.
In Connecticut.
It was called Choate Rosemary.
Oh, I know that. Yeah.
Very preppy Connecticut experience. It's interesting. My dad was also very high achieving, did well in school, went to Harvard. And so it's true. I always saw, it's not like my mom was not high achieving. She was the first female Time columnist in Time magazine.
Wow.
But she also had some very visible, and looking back on it, mental health conditions.
Yeah.
I remember her getting very depressed.
Yeah.
And she was super funny, and she could make fun of herself, and she was really good at making fun of those around her without making you feel bad. Although my brother and I have discussed this in retrospect, and there was a lot of sarcasm growing up. I knew my mom smoked pot, and I did feel that, with her loss, I felt like I may have lost the parent who could relate to what I was going through more than I thought my father could. And my father was he tried so hard. I remember he would take notes when I would get in trouble. He'd say, Tim, what does that bong make you feel like? And tell Timmy, why would you smoke at your grandmother's house? I was like, I don't know that. Because,
you're giving him material to write about. Did you ever worry that Ryder would self-medicate?
Yes, sure. Definitely worried about that. And I got sober in 1997.
Okay.
When I was 33 years old, and it changed everything for me. I was really kind of adrift. Professionally, Gigi and I were married at that point. We went out briefly towards the end of our high school career. And in fact, I was going to come out here to California to school. I'd gotten into Pitzer School, one of the 5 Claremont schools. And I was really looking forward to coming to school in California. He was going to NYU. And so we were going out, and our relationship continued into the summer. And then I got off the wait list from Vassar, a small liberal arts school in Poughkeepsie. And I was like, okay, sure. But really, the only reason I said yes to Vassar was to stay close to Gigi. And 2 weeks later, she broke up. That was Vassar was awesome. And Vassar turned out to be a good experience for me. I met a lot of good friends who were still friends. And I formed a band called the Midnight Jam. We still get together and play when
I love it. Will you invite me?
I will invite you. No, the band now I have is called, what are they called? I was going to say the Rejuvenators. No.
If you don't know the name of your band, we're going to have to edit that part out.
Hold on. I have so many bands. No, there's Washer Shores, the Lower Companions.
He has been in a lot of bands.
All right. But so you got sober when you were 33 years old because you probably needed to.
I definitely needed it. And I think that my marriage was not in great shape. And my profession, I had worked in movie business, done some development work, but nothing was adding up and nothing meant very much. And after getting sober, it was the first time I had the courage to actually try and write. And I remember I wrote a spec Ally McBeal with a partner, and that got us a job. And I also remember that same year, Gigi coming to me, and we had not been thinking about starting a family. We were both terrified at that thought. And I remember her coming to me and saying, I think I might be pregnant. And it was,
So you were sober when you had your first child. Oh, okay, great.
First child.
Yeah.
This one who's sitting across from us.
Ryder.
And no chance that happens. They talk about in early sobriety, you don't want to leave before the miracle. That's one of my miracles right there.
And also, I think it's worth pointing out that some people feel like they need to be medicated or high or potentially like manic to be creative. And here you were, you got sober, and then that's when you were able to do your best writing.
I also enjoy Grateful Dead concerts more than ever sober.
Okay. That's very good. I like that.
He's the one sober person hired now. There's
Not
babies for him.
Not true. We're a minority.
Right. Okay, Ryder, I am interested to hear about your manic episode and how that came about.
Yeah, well, I think it was sort of an extended episode. I don't know how I would really define it, but basically, it first started the February of my senior year. So pretty much exactly 2 years ago. We're recording this in January of 2020. So February of 18. Your last question to my dad, just to set it up a little bit, like I definitely did self-medicate in high school. I didn't know what I was self-medicating. I was diagnosed with anxiety when I was 10, but it was never really addressed. And that's not my parents' fault. I think I just sort of refused to take medication. But I was always in therapy. I was in therapy like on and off since they got divorced, since they separated. So 10 plus years.
Wouldn't you call that addressing it, though? Going to therapy?
Okay, no, what I'm saying, like, I never, whatever. I just sort of forgot that I had been diagnosed.
And medication was discussed. I don't know if you remember that, but
Yeah, I'm saying,
was
okay, but anyways.
And we opted also. And Ryder, even as a 12, 13-year-old, definitely didn't want the medication that was
For anxiety.
Yeah, but anyways,
Okay.
like, I definitely did self-medicate, and I remember, like, I would get anxious at parties and stuff, even though I was a pretty well-liked guy, but I would just drink and smoke weed. And leading up to my manic episode, I did, some other stuff, and yeah, I was pretty adrift, but I thought, senior year, whatever. But I was
Second
sort of,
semester, senior
yeah, so
year.
it's just
Time
just
to,
cracked
yeah.
second semester. Luckily, and I said this in my presentation the other day, I actually had gotten all my college applications in. I was done my SAT. So my life was sort of set up for me. I'm like, damn, it's just, easy from here. But it definitely was not. Because, it comes when it comes. It strikes when it strikes. And one day I'm just feeling normal, and the next day I'm like going a million miles an hour. Like every thought was like an idea to change the world, and I'm like a superior being.
Do you remember what triggered it? Because I think
this is too complex. I don't think anything really triggered it. It just sort of happened. That's what I have to make my peace with. Like, I don't think I did anything. I don't think my dad did anything. I don't think anyone did anything. You talking about the phone call?
I'm talking about the phone call.
Yeah, this is my story to tell.
But dude, there were a couple things. There were a couple things. And by the way, it's not your fault. Wait a minute, Ryder. Hold on. Okay, I get it. We have different perspectives. And actually, I think this is what's valuable for people to hear. It's like we have totally, sometimes very different perspectives on the exact same events. By the way, I want to hear you.
You totally just cut me off, right?
I do, but I want to provide just some context that I think some important context. Bipolar disorder, we talk about like many mental health conditions, can run in the family, and it's not anyone's fault, but they can sometimes be surfaced by environmental factors, triggers. And there was a phone call from my former stepmother.
It's not a trigger, dude.
And
just trust me.
Okay. And there was getting an internship. So there was sort of a bad thing and a good thing. All right. I just wanted to point those things out.
Neither of those things had anything to do. I had some adverse, some outside reactions to those things because I was already trending towards mania. But basically, yeah, I just really sped up. It was like everything turned to like 2 times speed or 3 times or 300 times. It was really scary for those around me, but for me, it felt like I was, like walking I was on a dream. Everything was going to be amazing or was amazing. And to your point about creativity, like I was like writing poems and writing songs. And then it was probably like a week. And I ended up seeing my high school counselor, and he immediately was like, okay, I know what's happening. It's very clear. And I was hospitalized for 3 days. And I don't want to go too much on this point, and I didn't, I haven't lived like the most cushy life of all time, but going to private school in Santa Monica, living in Santa Monica, like, I had a pretty great life. And then you're basically behind bars in Chinatown with some really, dodgy people, also struggling with mental illness. And I just turned 18. I was 2 months, removed. So I would have been in some sort of youth hall, but instead, which really freaked myself, and I know my mom, and I can't speak for this guy, but that was like really jarring. And
to be an adult.
Oh, yeah.
So people are really messed up people. And I think when I was in there, I was done. I didn't want to do it. I was like, there's no point anymore. But I don't really get those thoughts.
When you say you were done, you mean like suicide?
I don't think I ever got to that point anymore. It was just like, you could call it that, but it never got to like concrete plans or anything. I was just like, this is what my life is. And I was in solitary in this metal room, no mirrors, just a block for a bed.
It's so jarring, right? To go from like feeling so great and feeling so good, and then, but
it really takes you down. That's for
sure. So it was a counselor at school that diagnosed you.
Oh no! He's not a doctor.
Right, but you said he knew what was going on, and then
I think he could tell I was having episodes. went to the ER.
Well, do you mind? Can I just jump in here?
Yeah.
He called.
Who did you ask? Do you mind?
He called. Okay, by the way, father son, right?
Yes.
This is the dynamic. The counselor, his name is
He
Adam
called
Waters.
us.
His name is Adam Waters, and I want to give him a shout out because he is the hero in our life stories, all of our lives. He called Gigi, Ryder's mom, and he called me, and he said, "You guys got to come down here now." And Ryder had been unable to sit through his first class in school that day, and so was sitting in the counselor's office when we got there. And he just told us straight up, Ryder's is suffering a manic episode. This is very serious. You need to take him to the ER immediately. So he diagnosed a manic episode.
No, that's not a diagnosis.
Right, that's what he told
alerted
us.
you.
So, yeah, the ER doctor was like, "Yeah, bipolar disorder." But at that moment, I was still riding a high, and I was like, "What? No." And to speed things up a little bit, pardon my wordplay there, it took me a while to accept it. And because a lot of my family members have dealt with alcoholism and drug abuse, and I definitely had not had a great relationship with alcohol, particularly alcohol. I was like, I'm an alcoholic. The symptoms are similar. I did drug-induced. Somebody drugged me with Molly. Or I was just really pretty delusional, to be in denial. And especially because, and this is what's so important about the advocacy, is I wish I could just go back and change how I thought about bipolar. If my advocacy can help someone else in that situation, and my father's and everybody who works in this office, and everybody who works in NAMI in general, they can just help someone who is going to be diagnosed in the future sometime and help them change the way they think about mental health conditions. Because I thought those people are crazy. They're so different. Like a lot of the famous and successful people who had been diagnosed with the same thing I had. But basically, after a period of medically induced, just zombie being, really just, I was
taking you straight down.
I was so high up and then I was so far down. I had sort of another resurgence of mania, but it was only a couple months later, so I kind of think about it as a continuation. But during this one, I wrote a song and I performed it in front of my entire school.
It was a great song.
During the manic episode?
Yeah,
during the second kind of hyper.
Oh.
For me, it was a continuation because the meds just pushed it down. It was bubbling, and then it just sort of came back up like that. Yeah, I performed the song, yada, yada, yada. And after that one, it was even I was so low pretty much the entire summer of last year. Felt very alone. I was in outpatient treatment at the time with some really great people, but it felt like someone else was living my life for me. And I was just sort of watching, which is not a great feeling to have. And then it sort of came back again towards the end of the summer when I had gotten a good job. After this one is when I actually went to inpatient treatment. And that, I think, it was the real kicker. This is now September 2018, and I haven't had anything since then. Not even a brush or an hour or a minute
of mania.
But being an inpatient, and I talked about this in my presentation, you're just with a lot of people. We all have the same goal. Everyone who's living with you has the exact same goal, which is just to get better. Maybe it comes in different ways. And I met a lot of people who sort of came in the same way, which is just sort of getting in touch with yourself and accepting what you've been diagnosed with and accepting your lot, which doesn't have to be bad. And that's sort of the funny thing. Once you accept where you're at, you can only get better. And until you accept it, it's going to be really hard. And that sort of happened to me. But I also put in touch with a world-class psychiatrist, and my medication was all sort of sorted. That stretch of about 7 months was definitely the hardest time in my life, and I would love to keep it the hardest time in my life.
Well, I just have to say, I got very teary-eyed when you said you're doing what you're doing now because had you only accepted it early on. And I think about my mom, who wasn't diagnosed until almost 70 years old because she was running from it her entire life. And now that she's finally accepted it, she's so happy and doing so well. But that acceptance is what's going to help take the suffering away. And I can see why you're so proud because the way Ryder just articulated that was so perfect. So I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing.
And I do want to say I'm so proud of how he's accepted not just his condition, but also learned to accept help and support from the people who love him. And actually, I was remembering one other really key figure in his life, his godfather, who's a movie producer, who after Ryder's third sort of resurgence of mania, Ryder was feeling good, but by this point, we knew what it was. We knew what mania was. The first time it happened, his mom and I thought he was on cocaine or something.
Right.
We had never seen behavior like that.
Like staying up. Were you staying up at
Well,
night?
the only behavior we'd seen like that was back in the 80s.
Right,
People were staying up all night.
Yeah.
So this third time, he's very combative and he comes after me hard. And I don't always,
I think that's difficult verbally.
Yeah, verbally, yes.
That's funny. When you say combative and comes after me hard,
right? Yes, we've never gotten into a fist fight.
Okay.
There have been some pretty serious shoving matches, but never gotten.
I did throw in pursuit of like a vape during like a particular point of mania. I literally just threw myself at him.
Yeah,
to get by him
because I didn't want him to go out and buy $500
right.
like jewel pods or something. So
spending is insane.
But I got this friend to come over, his godfather, to come over and help convince him to voluntarily check himself into a place. And Ryder respects this guy. And this guy put his hands on Ryder's shoulders. And he said, Ryder, what do I do? And Ryder's like, you're a producer. And then Matt says, let me produce this. Aww. And he did. And he let Matt, his name is...
I feel like at the time was a little misled. But, he did exactly what he had to do because he was like, yeah, I thought I was going to like an outpatient, which is what I would end up in. I was hospitalized again. This is really important, actually. So that hospitalization, I was flying pretty high. And so because of the intake, I'm sure you understand the intake process, they're like, oh, he's, pretty messed up. So they put me in a somewhat acute ward where within about 10 minutes, the food was thrown at me. I was called the N-word, hopefully one-time thing. It was just crazy. It was way worse than Chinatown. And so...
You got to put $1 in the stigma jar for saying crazy.
It was really hostile. And anyways, I got put in this sort of... The unit where only people who are voluntarily there. So it's just people who know they need help. Or are are sort of okay with it. And I got this great roommate in the Air Force. Main trait of mania, I think, in a lot of people, but for me, which is really weird to think back on, I'm not a religious person, really. During, a period of mania, I get so religious, thinking about God and the devil and the Jesus and which is really crazy.
God-fearing. He also wrote a song. He wrote a song which I do remember the first words of, if you'd like me to sing it.
When would I ever want you to sing? I mean, that's going to be a pass from me.
Okay.
We could be on anybody's podcast.
That could be for the extra features.
All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just going to say I'm really grateful about that story. Yeah. I just wanted to touch on what my dad said. Yeah. Because that was a real turning point. It was September 1st, 2nd, 3rd, whatever, of 2018. And then from that hospital, I was put in outpatient and so on and so forth.
No, inpatient. Remember, you went to
residential.
You went to residential for 2 months.
But so it was a turning point for you because you realized that this is not just a one-time thing, that this is something that you're going to...
keeps coming up.
Yeah.
Something has to change.
Right.
And it's not going to change from this. But the doctor who was at this hospital who I continue to see, I actually see him soon, but...
So,
changed my life.
From a father's perspective, how was that seeing your son in the hospital?
His first stay in the psych ward were the hardest 3 days of my life, 100%. And we were convinced we had to have him committed under a 5150, which is a 3-day psychiatric hold, because this is what the ER psychiatrist, the attending psychiatrist, strongly recommended, because he had just turned 18. And we wanted to make sure that he did not walk out before he'd been properly stabilized. So we agreed to it. We signed the papers, and he got wheeled out at midnight from the ER, strapped to a gurney, put in an ambulance to go to the psych ward. And it was
heartbreaking.
It was heartbreaking
to see.
And, but we
your
thought,
child,
okay. And but we knew we couldn't do him any good. And the next day, I woke up after not sleeping very long, convinced I had to break him out of there. What have I done? I cannot have my son behind bars. And I started speeding towards the facility, tears running down my face. And then this best friend called me again with his wife. And I said, God damn it, what did I do? Those fuckers, they're keeping him behind bars. Nobody picks up when we call. I can't have him in there. And they said, no, stop it. You can't approach them with that attitude. Yeah. You have to be grateful. They're taking care of your son. They're keeping him safe. But this is what they said to me. And by the time I showed up, and by the way, the visiting hours, we had been told the day before, his mom and I, that the visiting hours were from 7 to 8. So we thought, oh, great, that's long. We'd be there all day. We'll split shifts.
No, it's 7 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
We didn't
realize, so all of a sudden we realized, wait, we can only see him 1 hour a day. And this is, of course, the standard. But we didn't know. This is all new territory for us. It was so hard. I remember pulling off the side of the freeway while my friends kind of talked me down and got me into a place of sort of gratitude and...
But did you give me his shoes?
Yeah, so I went over there and I was able to convince them at 10 in the morning, because I was coming from a place of gratitude, to let me up and see him early. And I gave him my laceless shoes because they take your laces. And I also, maybe this was misguided, but I had a copy of Catcher in the Rye. And I thought maybe
we're back in the weeds. Basically, I really defaced this Catcher in the Rye. Just get me out of here. Get me out of this Joker notebook. Like
that's what happened. I mean, he couldn't read. He was on so much medication that he could not concentrate on the words. But he did use it as a journal.
So stole crayons.
Oh, wow.
So we have this copy of Catcher in the Rye.
It's like it's like a hell book. Like it's cursed. It's
but it's also a reminder of how your brain.
And you know what? The messages you were sending yourself. That the message is, I love my parents. I want to get out of here. I'm determined to get better. You just like these mantras that helped you.
Well, I was kind of convinced I willed myself out of there, even though it's a 72-hour hold. They just kind of let me go. But at the time, I was like, I am so strong. I got myself out of this hellhole,
Well, but out in 72 hours, he was able to talk himself out of there.
But I remember when I stepped out, I don't know. I'm usually better with metaphors, but it's almost like getting off a boat, and the boat had just you just survived some crazy thunderstorm on the boat, and if we finally got to land and you get off, but you're like, what the hell just happened? And I remember getting home, and every day for the next 2 weeks, I was just crying every day. I'm not a big crier. I wasn't before, I'm not now, but at that time I was just sobbing.
I love it when he cries because I think it's important, and I think you do sometimes cut yourself off from those deeper feelings. I'm a big crier. I love to cry, and I do, and I encourage this when I talk to students. Feel those feelings. That's very normal.
Not everybody cries.
I can only imagine causing you to cry. I mean, that's your life completely got turned upside down. Then your college applications have already been put in, and then you get accepted to BU.
I got into the BU. BU was my 5th choice.
Oh.
No. It's okay, because I think that's kind of a representation of how I was leading my life. BU is such a great school, and I just kind of stumbled into it. I got very lucky. Shout out to my college counselor at my high school, Martin McCann. But I wanted to go to Northwestern. I wanted to go to USC, all these names. BU is, I think, just as good of a school as any one that I applied to.
And maybe even the best suited.
Yes. Especially my grandpa lives there in Cambridge, Mass. But anyways, in treatment at the time, I was getting these letters back. But I remember I was at a party, my first party back, and I had to be sober, right? Because I was on all these meds. I was miserable. And I get this BU thing, and I was like, cool. I was still waiting on USC, Berkeley, all those, Michigan, no. But I came to realize, wow, this is really amazing. It's a great opportunity. I'm also really grateful to them and the people at my treatment center for helping me craft a thing to get a gap year, to secure a gap year, because I ended up living in treatment for September and October. I needed the whole year. But yeah, I'm very grateful to that.
You wrote a great letter.
That was mostly this guy.
Well, okay, but he wrote a letter saying, I need to take care of my mental health. Can I have a deferment? They're used to that. And they're also, colleges are very used to freshmen showing up and kind of flaming out, because that's when mental health conditions surface, right? And I know you know this, between 75% of mental health conditions surface between 18 and 22. Please don't quote me on that, but that is a statistic that I've heard. And I think it's because even though we know it's nobody's fault and a lot of these conditions are latent and genetic.
Truth is, probably most kids could use a gap year to get their mental health in order.
I sometimes think okay, let's say none of this happens, and I just go to school. A, it might have happened there, which would have been really thrown off everything. And B, something else could, just the year off really helped me get in touch with myself, continue accepting my mental health condition, and really just sort of gain clarity, because I was adrift before the, mania and the hospitalization and everything. Great word by my dad. And I think I would have been adrift into college. So I would have drifted into college. So.
And also, when you did go back to Boston, you were probably feeling so grateful to be where you were. And there's nothing better than gratitude. So,
well, he earned it.
How did your friends react? Because I know teenagers can be, I want to hear from you, but what I was going to say is I do think that your generation's a little bit more accepting, or are they?
I don't think so.
Oh, they weren't.
And
okay.
That's part of the reason I do what I do, also maybe even subconsciously. And I want to be a part of what we are doing here.
Okay.
It was just not great. And these people I'd known for 7 years at the time. I'm going on 10 years now with my friends of mine. And they're still my best friends in the world. But none of them knew how to react.
Right.
They never had somebody come into their school and talk to them about mental health.
Right.
Nobody came into our school like that. And I wish they had. So to answer your question, yeah, I don't think I got like a solid, I think people just didn't know what to do. Some people didn't talk to me. Some people were like, yo, what up, man? Like acting like it was normal. And it was really difficult coming back to school. I missed 6 weeks. And I was still in treatment, like after school and stuff, but I was in treatment all day, every day for those, 6 weeks. I came back to school. Somebody asked me about this the other day in Malibu. I just hid in the library. When before I was this, really talkative and joyous, just sort of really, call me charismatic, maybe. But I was always like entertaining people and talking to people, and now I was hiding in the library behind the stacks on my computer, just like pretending or hoping.
Because they didn't know how to react to you, or they were being.
Well, because I was hiding from. I'm sure people were just like, "Yo, what up, man? Like, it's been a long time, missed you." Especially when people saw me sort of in the manic state, they were like, "Oh God, like, what do we do?" And I totally get it, and I've forgiven my friends because I don't think they really were consciously doing anything wrong or malicious. I did lose a couple friends, especially like my best friend at the time. We're not friends at all anymore, which is pretty crazy. You live and you learn. And I still have a lot of friends. So
I just want to say one thing about the friends. Was we do talk, and Ryder talks about the importance of friends understanding and being supportive. I totally get that this is part of what fuels you giving these talks, is educating people more about how to respond when a friend is in trouble. Well, a couple of his friends were worried about him.
Yeah, they did go to the counselor.
And they took to the counselor, but they also told their parents, who called his mom. But that was even before the manic episode. It was during the manic episode, but that tipped us off that something was going on that his friends were worried about. It sort of increased our worry and led us more down the road of thinking there's a drug problem.
I did 2 people, but yeah, I guess they were pretty helpful at the time, but not anymore.
Those aren't friends of yours anymore.
Not at all.
Because you are now going in and talking to teenagers, both of you, what has surprised you most about going in and speaking with these middle schoolers and high schoolers?
It gets a little awkward when no one has a question, but when people do, it is so awesome. That's the best word I can put on it. Not a teenager anymore, maybe I can't say that, but
I say awesome all the time.
And it feels very rewarding because you're like, I just bared my heart out in front of these kids, and they actually listened, and they have questions. And this girl the other day, shout out to her, she had like 10 questions. No one else was really asking.
I think she may have had a little crush on him.
But people just really engaging, and like, you know what? You come out of Dad and I leave, and we were driving back to wherever we're driving back to. And I think to myself, oh my God, we actually did make a difference. It might have been a small difference, but we made a difference.
Well, you see, I now, having given over 100 of these presentations, I no longer measure the success by the number of questions we get. It's hard first of all, it's hard to listen to people talk for an hour about mental health, and it's hard to join the conversation. But we get these evaluations back, and almost every single one of them is grateful. And again, mostly for the youth presenters, because it's so important for them to see young people who identify with mental health conditions, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and all of a sudden it kind of demystifies it for them. As far as the surprising thing, I guess I do get surprised at how willing they are to just really listen and take it in. I love it, and I feel very rewarded when they want to join the conversation. One woman yesterday, one young woman, probably 16, 17, talked about her experience in the psych ward. And she talked about it in front of a room full of her friends who she probably hadn't mentioned it with before.
I wouldn't assume that.
Well, judging from the reactions, it seemed like some of them were a little surprised to hear that. I guess I'm surprised and gratified by the fact that we seem to create a pretty safe space for these kids to talk about that kind of stuff. It's what fuels me to keep going and keep expanding.
I think also, Tim, becoming NAMI's program director was not a career aspiration of yours. So can you explain how it happened and why you believe it's the most rewarding job?
Yeah. I've lost track of how many careers I've had in my life, and I've had a lot of interesting jobs, but I don't think that I've ever had a job where I felt super connected to what I was doing. Nothing against any of the TV shows I worked for or the tech startup I worked for. I just never had that feeling like, oh yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. So I had never heard of NAMI right before Ryder's diagnosis, but then both his mom and I were very quickly directed towards NAMI resources. And I took the NAMI 12-week family class with Sharon Dunas, who's sort of a West Side mental health legend. And she's also the co-president of NAMI West Side. When I finished the class, I did have a feeling like, this is an organization. I completely believe it. I was driving for Uber at the time, and I had a bunch of other freelance jobs, and I really wasn't in a position to just sort of blindly offer myself as a volunteer. But I went to Sharon at the end of the class. I said, Sharon, is there anything I can do for you? Is there any role I could fill? And it turned out their education coordinator had just left. So they needed an education coordinator, which is a part-time role, very little pay. And when I saw how little pay at the time, I almost immediately just said no. But then I interviewed with Sharon's co-president, Ralph Fagan, who was at that point the director of operations, Aaron Ryan, who's now our executive director. And Aaron and I hit it off. And I just continued to feel like, oh my God, this is a place I can do some good work and maybe make a difference. That was a year and a half ago. And in that time, I got trained to be an Ending the Silence presenter. I went out. I was actually experienced what it's like to carry this message to kids and to the We Love You. And good things have happened with NAMI West Side in the time that I've been here, not only because of me, but especially because of Aaron's leadership. And we've got a great team here. And now we've also, I'm fortunate enough to be in a position to have been promoted to program director. And you're right, it was never a career aspiration, but also I was never someone who plotted things out. I kind of responded to circumstances, and, I couldn't be happier with the way these circumstances led me to this role. And it is sort of ironic that it never would have happened if not for the kind of awful occurrence of Ryder's condition. But I think both of us, and I really give him more credit than I give me, have responded really well to that bomb being dropped on us. Now, there was also another person who played a really pivotal role in Ryder's recovery and also in our families coming to accept and realize that there was a good future possible for Ryder. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, Brittany Bronson really helped me. When I was talking about earlier, like the pivotal time when I was in the hospital, she basically referred to us this psychiatrist, completely changed everything for me, and it's really supported me through my recovery. By proxy, just by that, she really helped. But also she, having just met me, came and visited me in the hospital a ton, really encouraged me to just accept the deal. And she had sort of a similar story, and it was good to see someone pretty successful, or at least just seemed to be doing pretty well, and a pretty nice person who had the same issues as I did. And so she was a real big help in that very crucial time in my life. So shout out to her.
Yeah, I think Brittany was a mentor to Ryder in a way. And also, I remember introducing her to Gigi, and it was so good for us to see someone. I hope it's okay. I don't think Brittany would mind because she speaks on behalf of mental health, and she's been a co-presenter.
Well, I adore Brittany, and she is one of my guests. So you'll get to hear her episode.
Amazing. Well, then, okay. So your audience is going to hear more about Brittany.
Know all about Brittany.
But I do want to say it was so important for us at that time to see someone who was a little older than Ryder, but who had learned to live happily, successfully, and was living a rich, rewarding life with the same condition that he'd been diagnosed with. So thank you, Brittany.
And we love you, Britt. Ryder, were there any warning signs that you didn't catch?
Yeah, not sleeping. I mean, that's as straight as I can be, is staying up all night, doing nothing, especially like early on. Because later on, it becomes like you're typing just, oh my God, your master plan to take over the world. Night one, it's just, messing around on YouTube. And then it's 6 a.m. and you're like, wait a second, what? Also, rapid speech. I talk about this a lot. Yeah, my friends were like, why are you talking so fast? And I did, I'll be very honest. I'm sure my dad will like this because he wants to mention it at every turn. And I don't like to talk about it in the class because it is pretty embarrassing to me. But I sort of concocted a story to my friends that I was on Adderall because I didn't know what was happening with myself. And people were saying, are you on Adderall? I'm like, sure, yeah. And I sort of concocted the story. And that was obviously a huge warning sign because it's a big lie. And it is that bad to where you have to lie to a lot of people. Clearly, there's something amiss.
I appreciate you sharing that. And that reminds me, that's what Gigi heard from these concerned parents. They said he's stolen Adderall from his girlfriend and it's really bad. So one thing that happened very early on in the ER, they give him all this medication to stabilize him, which is also really hard to watch your kid go through. But they drug tested him. And he's totally clean. Totally 100% clean, not a shred of Adderall, which was like, oh, well, that let us know this is brain chemistry we're talking about. Not
It's like your brain's just firing so fast that you want to get the words out. My mom had pressured speech, and it's hard to be around. I have to be honest. And so I could see why your friends who knew you well were like, what's happened? Yeah.
That just made me think, like, if there was some sort of footage, I mean, it would be so hard to watch. He's talking. I already talk kind of fast, to be honest. So, yeah.
And you can't get a word in. You can't.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Because the person's talking so fast.
I do have some footage. Oh, there is footage.
Oh, yeah. My dad was taking pictures of me, like, being drug tested.
Well, no, there's footage of you performing that song, backwards cap and that, doing that song. And I think that's footage of you in Mania.
But yeah. Probably more hypo, but...
Yeah, the hypo.
Yeah, I was smoking cigarettes. It was insane.
Well, I have loved this conversation. I just have a few more questions for you guys. And I'm going to ask you both the same question. And I'm going to start with you, Tim. Tim, if you could write your younger, let's say 18-year-old self, usually I say 20, but you're 18 years old and you're receiving a letter from your future self. So like where you are now. And it's a love letter, right? Because it's like, dear family, we're writing letters to our loved ones. What would you say in that letter to tell your 18-year-old?
Right. There is a saying that's becoming more popular, and so it's feeling a little bit like a cliche, but people are saying it in the mental health realm more and more. It's okay to not be okay. It would be a version of that I would want to tell myself, like it's feeling not okay is a part of life. And you can get through that. I actually wrote a script called Aftermath, where I imagined myself in the immediate aftermath of my mom's accident. Because I remember I have sort of a visual of sitting on the floor outside our apartment, waiting for someone to come and tell me what was going on. So I sort of started from that real place. And then I have this middle-aged guy coming in, who's me, and who comes and I sit down next to myself. So I wrote this. We this question, and I sort of like, what the older me was trying to impart was a sense of spirituality, a sense of forgiveness, a sense of self-compassion. I don't think I had any of that. I think I had a lot of that maybe in me, but I just was stuffing it down. I just really remember feeling cut off from myself. So what I would, again, a long-winded, answer, but what I would try to tell myself is not you're going to be okay, because I don't really think anybody can predict the future, but you are okay. Even with all that un-okayness in you, you are okay. And you're still connected to your mother. That was the other thing I couldn't allow myself to feel. Now I 100% feel it, and I see it in him, I see it in his sister, my daughter, and I don't want to burden them. There's so much more than a connection to my mom, but they have her in them. And so anyway, that's part of my spirituality. It's part of what I would try to tell 18-year-old Tim, like, dude. And also, the other big thing I would tell 18-year-old Tim, stop trying to be so fucking cool. It's okay not to be cool. I think my kids would agree I'm super uncool, and I'm super cool. I'm super cool being uncool.
I think that comes with age, though, right? Yeah. I mean, when you're 18, it's all about that.
I know teenagers who are better able to just appreciate, hey, man, I'm here, and that's okay.
Yeah. What is that, like in a dream? In my experience, every kid from my sister's age, younger, like let's say 13 to mid-20s, all you want to be is cool.
Yeah. I think there are a few kids that are accepting of the quirkiness, and but that's more rare than not.
Well, one of the things that I'm so proud of Ryder is his continued acceptance of who he is, how well he's managed his challenges, and how he's carving out a path that is just a Ryder Davis path.
Yeah.
It's no other. Yeah. It's not a path. He's not going to be like anybody else. He's going to be.
I totally understand why you feel that way after speaking with you, Ryder. I mean, you're young to have come to that point already. So that leads me to asking you that question. And so
how old?
I mean, I'm going to say 18, right before, or maybe right after the incident.
My 18th birthday. But if it's before or after?
Well, you tell me.
I don't know.
I would say.
I couldn't read.
When would have been the right time to get this one?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, before, let's touch on this a little more brief than my papa. Don't get too down. Try to accept this. I know how hard it is because I am you. And yeah, the acceptance thing, I mean, it's so hard. I deal with it though. Like when you said, totally okay that you said this because it's true. But when you said, yeah, this is something that you're probably going to be dealing with the rest of your life, I'm like, oh, of course I know it. Every cell in my body knows it. It makes me like, oh. And also, like, in the past, 16 months, no adverse effects. Nothing. I feel good. I mean, I don't have the same energy I used to, but I still have a lot of energy. So, anyways.
I just saw you do push-ups.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You got it.
So I think if I had a letter to, let's say, 2 weeks after that first episode, I wouldn't say you are okay because I wasn't then, and no amount of encouragement, which I was getting, but I couldn't say you are okay because I wasn't. But I would say, not only is it going to be okay, it's going to be great. And you're going to be in school in 16 months, in college, and just keep your head down. Don't lose sight of what's ahead, which I did. And maybe that slowed me down a little bit. But I think what's really important also is because I was hearing a lot at the time, and you still hear it, is like, oh, it took me 5 years to figure out my meds. It took me 7 years to get everything sorted before I could start my life again. It took me about 7-8 months. So I would share that and maybe send a selfie in school. And maybe send him this podcast.
I would like that.
Audio letter.
I love that.
That 7 to 8 months you just talked about felt very long.
Yeah.
But now in
it feels longer than the year and a half almost that's past since.
Yeah. And by the way, down the road, that medication might change. It's all fluid, right? But I love that. I love that answer so much.
I wonder, maybe you did get that.
It'd be trippy though. I wish I could go back and just say, yo, what up? I'd show up at the door.
Tim, what do you do that brings you happiness? Any happiness habits or things that ground you?
Oh my God, I have a lot of happiness habits.
That's good.
First of all, I just took his sister, my 16-year-old daughter, to her first Dead show over the holiday. It was great.
You're right,
great happiness. He's speeding me up.
Yes.
He's giving me the speed up. But hold on, no. Let's revel in that fact. I took my 16-year-old daughter to a Dead show, and she loved it. And John Mayer's presence definitely helped, but we were dancing together, having a great time, and I could not have imagined that. So a happiness habit is listening to music, especially Grateful Dead music, sharing that with my friends. I also play music. I'm, an amateur musician, and as I was saying earlier in the podcast, I'm in a lot of different bands. I really enjoy. So playing music. One that has become more important to me over the last few years is body surfing. I love body surfing and jumping in the ocean. And I say this in my presentation because we talk about positive coping strategies. I always feel better coming out of the water than I did going in. So, being with my kids, that's a happiness habit. Taking them out to dinner, just spending time with them.
That's really nice.
Yeah, that was nice. So I have lots of them. Those are sort of some of the highlights.
I love that.
Highlights, happiness highlights.
You're an amazing dad. I can tell.
Well, I'm trying.
You are.
You'd have to ask him and his sister, but I think I do a pretty good job.
Well, from the outside, you definitely are. Ryder.
Yes.
What about you? What keeps you grounded and makes you happy?
Also listening to music. I love going to concerts, but I love playing basketball. I love playing basketball, and I've been getting a lot more into it in school and then coming back here with my friends.
Oh, that's awesome.
I just played for 2 hours yesterday. And it's a great workout. It's very fun, and I'm getting a lot better. And it's just fun playing with friends as well. And it also just, it really takes your mind off everything. I don't think about anything. You just think about what's going on. Yeah, I love watching movies. I really love watching movies. I feel very connected to the business through, my dad's family and my family. Yeah, so probably watch movies, playing basketball. Oh, hanging out with my family. Come on. I love playing golf with my dad, although I haven't done it in a while.
But we love watching movies, TV shows together. That's something we enjoy together. And actually, I took him to a Dead show too, but he was, unfortunately, I think, a little too medicated at the time.
I was zoning.
And not medicated the way the rest of the audience was,
exactly.
But he was...
I was non-consensually medicated. And I was literally wait, where are we? What show is this? No, Dad, it was me.
Yeah, but you enjoyed it, but not the way you could.
So yes, that is the way I even sometimes unconsciously cope. It's just spend time with my family, spend time with my friends, play basketball.
I've loved this conversation so much, honestly. If you haven't noticed, I've had a smile pretty much the whole time. Do you want to just tell us where the listeners can find out about NAMI?
Yes. Well, okay. So NAMI is a national organization, right, with over 1,000 affiliates across the country. We are NAMI Westside Los Angeles, and our website address, I think, is pretty easy to remember. It's namila.org.
Or Namila.
Uh-huh.
Or Namila.
Well, yes, if you're trying to confuse them, it's Namila.
No.
If you want to make it easier, you say namila.org, and there you can find information about all the programs we offer. We have family classes for family members and loved ones. We have classes for family members, for peers, people who identify with mental health conditions. And then we have all our school programs too. So NAMILA.org.
And they're free, right?
These are all our
Which is
programs
incredible.
are free. Thank you.
That's
Thank you
incredible.
For,
and the Ending the Silence program, I'll have a link to that as well.
yeah, that's great. There's a page on
Coming to a school
the
near
website.
you.
Yeah,
Unless you're out
exactly.
overseas, in which case, maybe not.
Well, potentially.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, if there's some travel benefits going on. And what about either of you? Do you want to give your Instagram or any of
Any
that?
plugs,
Or
then?
anything that you
No,
want to plug?
I don't
Okay,
have,
great,
I have no plugs.
great.
I will plug we have a great new lead presenter in our Ending the Silence program named Rachel Stein.
Oh, thank you.
Very happy. And if you are lucky enough to see Rachel present at your school, you will consider yourself very
Thank
blessed.
you. I'm excited to come to Malibu. I'm going to come to
Next week?
Malibu. I think it's next
You should
week. I
come.
don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
Am I going to get to do it with you?
Yeah, I want
Because
to.
Oh,
he's on an
good.
extended winter break. So he's
Oh.
going to do
Okay. He said that to the students too. I'm in college. It's just longer because
Yeah,
I'm in college.
yeah.
It feels
No,
like
but
an
I
internal
know they get
break
like
to
a
me.
month off,
When you
right?
say, especially
I know.
because I have a mental health condition, you say I'm on an extended winter break. It sounds like it's been extended by someone else on my behalf.
Right.
So no, I'm
Right.
just on winter break. It's everyone else.
Are
all
you
my friends
looking
home.
forward to going back to Boston?
Yes, in many ways, but not for the cold.
Right.
But
Because
I'm
this
excited to
weather
connect
is
with
so
my dorm
nice.
and my friends, and yeah, I mean, it's that's my life.
That's so great. Well, thank you so much. Really,
thank you
this
so
has
much for having
been
us.
my pleasure.
Dear
And
Rachel,
Can I
Yes,
just have one
please.
last word?
Yeah.
Because I really want to say thank you, first of all, for having us on and for spreading the word, because it is so important. And this is what we talk about in our presentations and in our programs, how important the family is to the recovery of someone with a mental health condition. And when you have family support and you have a family who they're not going to do everything perfectly, but if they're willing to learn and grow and find new ways of communication, you are helping your loved one in more ways than you can imagine. So I love that you're doing this podcast. I love that you're spreading that message. And so I just want to end on that
Thank
note of
you.
gratitude.
I would say the same thing about you. So thank you so much. All right. Well, bye.
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 thank you.
This is Rachel Steinman. For more information or to contact me with any questions, comments, or guest ideas, please check out rightnowrachel.com. That's right with a W. Thank you so much for listening, subscribing, and sharing, dear family. And if you found value in what you've just heard, I would love and so appreciate a great review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, I wish you love, happiness, and good mental health.